Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup College Football Podcast. Today, we are previewing the AAC, and I am joined. We're joined with our special guest today. But before we get to our special guest, I am joined, as always, by my co-host Buck Metrics. How are you doing tonight?
Yeah, joined by me and my chihuahua, which you can probably hear barking in the background. How am I? I'm taking one for the team. This one hurts. I love this shirt. Back up so we can see.
There we
First
go.
time I've worn this since the Cotton Bowl. I think that took all the good luck out of this T-shirt, and I think we'll just move on from that so you can thank me later for taking one for the team. But I am delighted to introduce our guests. We had him once already to do the ACC. Got to say, as I scouted the guests for these previews, I did an A+ job, and this guy's a big part of it. Josh from @CFFGuys. Hello, Josh. Why don't you tell us about CFFGuys? We didn't touch on that
Yeah.
on the ACC preview.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, man. It's a Twitter handle that a friend and I started 10 years ago. He dropped out pretty quickly, and so the name is not appropriate for the fact that it's only one CFF guy now. But, man, I'm just on Twitter, like to throw out some stuff on, a couple threads, top 10 list of college fantasy football, which is my background, things like that. And then I work for Fantasy Points, heading up their college football team. So enjoy doing all that stuff.
Cool. Yeah, if you don't follow Josh, definitely do. He's a really good follow. We'll get to the fantasy football aspect in just a second. But first, it was kind of almost announced, I guess it pre-announced, that Colorado is apparently going to move to the Big 12 after this season.
Soft launch.
Soft launch, yeah. Very well said. So this will be interesting. Robert, what are your first thoughts on this?
Yeah, I kind of think this is it for the Pac-12. It's the Pac-9 now, but outside of that, this is the beginning of the end for the conference. There had been a lot of talk about this. There was the whole mess with there's no grant of rights. They said, and there's literally the commissioner of the Pac-12 last week on their media day said that, oh no, the longer we wait on this, the better our options are. And then a week later, they lost one of their teams. So that's not particular. So that shows you how well that's going. Earlier, there was a snafu involving San Diego State, where San Diego State was trying to announce to say we're going to leave the Mountain West because if they announced before a certain date, they had to pay a smaller withdrawal fee. But then there was no grant of rights for them to sign. So then they kind of had to slink back and say, actually, kind of forget about that. We didn't mean that. We didn't mean it. And then they're like, no, you can't do this. And then there was hilarious. It was like on ESPN, there was like an article. It says sources, San Diego State is still in the Mountain West, which of course, this is the level of how insane this has gotten. And it's like, this is all falling apart. And the thing is, if Colorado is thinking of leaving, which again, Colorado, they've had not had great football success in the last couple of years. They are relatively blue chip. They still do. They did have a national fan base from a couple decades ago. If they're thinking of going, other people are thinking of going. And Colorado is literally closest to Texas, which is where the Big 12 is. But if they're going to go, then you're probably looking at Arizona, potentially Oregon and Washington are going to go. I think, and the thing is, at this point, if you're the Pac-12 and you've been working, quotation marks on working there, you've been trying to negotiate this grant of rights deal. How big of a chunk was Colorado in that? It was a non-zero chunk. That was probably a pretty big chunk, right? So now you're like, okay, you lost Colorado. They're not going to be like, okay, I'm just throwing out a number here. It's not this number, but say, okay, $30 million a year per team, right? It's actually much lower than that probably, but say it was $30 million a team. It's not actually ESPN, but say you somehow simplify this down to being one person paying that for the entire thing. It's not. It was supposed to be a bunch of mismatch and stuff, but say it is. Are they really going to say, yeah, Colorado, whatever, doesn't matter. We'll give you the $30 million. No, they're going to be like 25. This is the thing. There is huge problems here now, and you can't just backfill that. And I think that if there's still no grant of rights deal, I think you're going to see other conferences poach the top Pac-12, and the Pac-12 is going to functionally dissolve and probably be kind of merged in. My guess of where this is going to go is the top teams are going to be picked off by the Big 10, Big 12, maybe the Big 10. We talked about this. I think there's a chance they could do something here. maybe not likely, but there's a chance. And then what's left is probably just going to get merged in with the Mountain West, and they're going to make some sort of new super conference thing.
Possibly, yeah. I'm still waiting to see what happens with the husk of the ACC. There might be, as one thought is like a pretty cool cross country conference that would be based on Oregon, Washington, and whoever doesn't get a bid from the ACC. I think if you have those two with like a Clemson and or Florida State, Miami, that'd be a pretty solid conference. I'd really like to watch that. One thing I just like to maybe take a different stand on than you. I think the beginning of the end for the Pac-12 is not this, but when they renewed Larry Scott's contract. But that's a 2-hour podcast. Josh, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great move by the Big 12, and I think they keep making moves that, like, they should be the ones that were dead after Oklahoma and Texas were leaving, and they've done nothing but really hit home runs since the new AD came in, or the commissioner came in for the Big 12. I think this guy's doing a great job. I mean, Colorado with Deion Sanders, as long as he's there, I mean, they're a moneymaker. And so I thought this is phenomenal for them. I think, maybe the writing's on the wall for the Pac-12. I do think, I do believe that Washington and Oregon will end up with the Big Ten at some point, but we'll have to see how all of that shakes out with, Miami and North Carolina and some of these other schools. I mean, this is all moving towards, right? Like, ultimately, Big Ten, SEC, super conferences, and then everybody else, I think, is just trying to figure out how they can salvage whatever. But, man, this is all big money stuff, and this is a domino that I think that falls, that kind of shows the hand, right? Like, and I'm mixing metaphors here, but I think in poker, right, you're beginning to reveal kind of what cards people have, and we'll see where all this ends up. But yeah, I'm excited about the future of college football. I just think the money's getting bigger and bigger, and it's kind of fun to watch.
Well, that means the coverage will be better too then, which I love.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think next year is going to be fascinating. You're going to have all the big moves are happening next year. You're going to have Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC, USC and UCLA in the Big Ten, Colorado in the Big 12. Whatever else the fallout of this is also going to be probably in place next year due to how the grant of rights deals work. And this is all shaping up for the first year of this is the first year. Next year will be the first year of the 12-team college football playoff. It's just going to be insane.
Yep.
Now, one more thing quickly on this before we get off to this actually does tie into the AAC, which we're previewing today. Because, and as you mentioned it, when Texas and Oklahoma left for the SEC, people thought the Big 12 was dead. There's talk that the Pac-12 was going to start plucking some teams from the Big 12. That didn't happen, of course. And then, as we know, they augmented. But the thing is, they actually grabbed some teams from the AAC. They grabbed Cincinnati, Houston. They grabbed UCF, and then they grabbed BYU. BYU's independent, but that's not the point. But my question is now, and I'll ask this to both of you: do you think there is some regret in the Big 12 that they say, hey, maybe we should have added Cincinnati? Like, I wonder if there's a little bit of regret now on that.
I think they almost had to do Cincinnati just because West Virginia needs a travel partner, and they were kind of in an outpost. But yeah, I think that they could have been in prime spot just to grab Oregon and Washington and say, hey, we're the third conference, but we're a super solid number third conference, and there's no disputing that. And they would be in line for just an enormous television deal rather than whatever BYU. BYU actually brings a pretty big following, but those other programs it would be a great fit, and you'd have a lesser version of the Big Ten and just across multiple time zones. And but I can't knock it too much because Yormark came in at a tough time, and he's kind of like the guy who turned the giant red paperclip into a house that you read about through Craigslist with all these weird things you trade and exchange. So he's done a good job. It's just, looking back, could have been better. That's a good question. Good point.
Yeah. It'd be interesting, too, to see if they go the Arizona State route, too. It kind of seemed like, right, the Pac-12 and the Big 12 are competing for, like, who's going to pluck off teams faster or, get them. And I think Big 12 has ultimately kind of won that battle.
Here's one last thing on that, and this is really nerd stuff, but it's interesting as it relates to this. I could see them going after Arizona because I've actually read that in their next media rights deal, Yormark is actually going to auction off football separate from basketball, just because they're such an awesome basketball conference and there's probably some unmonetized value there, which I think is brilliant. And Arizona would be somewhere between a lot less dilutive and possibly accretive in that situation, versus just, everything's just on football.
Yeah.
All right. So since we have CFF guy, this is plural or singular with us, we thought we'd do a little contest. And neither Robert nor I play fantasy football for college. We thought we'd each just pick 3 quarterbacks and just go kind of deep and see, give our 3 guys in just one sentence each on why. And then Josh should just tell us who did a great job and who stinks. So you want to go first, Robert? You want to alternate?
Okay.
Or let's alternate here.
We'll alternate picks here.
Okay.
So my first pick in this fantasy football draft, and to be fair, we're trying to find deep value picks here, right? Like, before we record this, I'm like, does Dylan Gabriel count? You guys said no. So we're trying to find value picks here. All right, so for my first pick, I'm going to go for quarterback for Cincinnati, Emory Jones. He was actually not horrible in Arizona State last year, one of the kind of bright spots of last year. And on top of that, he's going to have a new head coach in Scott Satterfield. And the thing is, now the other part playing into this is that, and again, we haven't previewed the Big 12 yet. Stay tuned. But when we do preview the Big 12, my take on the Big 12 is it's kind of a couple of good teams and then just a bunch of teams that do not have particularly good defenses. And I think that, just picking a quarterback who's half decent in a conference full of teams that are defensively struggled, or defensively challenged, we'll say, I think that's not a bad idea.
I like it.
I agree with that premise, and kind of along the same lines, I'm going to go with Hank Bachmeier at Louisiana Tech. Conference USA is pretty defensive deficient. Bachmeier is proven at a higher but not P5 conference. Sonny Cumbie did a sneaky, hidden good job in year 1 at Louisiana Tech. We went over that guy who kind of disappeared from football, Parker McNeil, I think his name was. He actually had really good stats, and then his backups were so bad that they just muddied the team stats for the entire year. This is a really good spot that he's coming into. Your second one?
Yeah, I'm going to go Frank Harris, UTSA. Is that okay? I think that's okay, right? It's Conference USA.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Seasoned veteran.
American.
Yeah, seasoned veteran. Oh, sorry, it's American. Yeah, seasoned veteran.
Yeah.
Probably one of the most seasoned veterans. But again, I think they could be one of the best teams in the American, and they're going to put up a lot of points. Like, again, when you're in a lot of these conferences that are not Power 5, again, it's really hard to get good cornerbacks, good defensive linemen, but not horrible. You can get a lot of fast guys who run track pretty easily, right? They can catch up. You can teach them to catch a ball, rather than you can teach a guy to be big. So I think it's going to be a lot more offensive focused, and having a really experienced quarterback. I mean, yeah, he's not going to make an NFL roster anytime soon, but yeah, I think he can put up a lot of points.
All right, fair. My second one, I'm doubling down on Conference USA as a crummy defensive conference. Plus, I'm going for the old Randall Cunningham getting the throwing and running stats. I'm going Diego Pavia from New Mexico State. I was all over him in our Conference USA preview. I'm not going to say the same thing again, but he has multiple ways to score, and he has, quite a few tomato cans on his schedule this season. Your
Love
third?
Yeah, I am. This is going to be you guys are going to, when I say this pick, you're going to laugh. I know it's not Grammar, it's from Florida. No, it's JT Daniels of Rice. Because the thing is, he was still, a quarterback for Georgia. And then he was not horrible last year at West Virginia. And, at some point, they're going to figure, some people are going to work with him and figure out how to throw the football. And, it's Rice. Again, they're not, they're also in the, I think they're in which conference are they?
They're the American.
They're in the American. That's what we're previewing today. The AAC. So, no, again, not a particularly good defensive conference. Could be maybe potentially one of the better quarterbacks in the conference itself. I think that's got to be worth something.
I can't disagree. And kind of along those lines, there's a couple of players that are in our preview today that I'm very bullish on that I'm just passing on, so not to spoil anything. So with that in mind, I'm going to go with year 2 of Joe Moorhead and DJ Irons of Akron. Very nice runner, super volatile. He has some really amazingly horrible games, but his best is really sneaky good. And aside from basically Ball State and Toledo, MAC defenses tend to be very obliging. So those are my 3.
Love
so,
it.
All
Yes.
right. So which one are you calling on to consult on your team between us two?
Okay. Dude, I will say, Mark, I love how deep you went. Because Pavia and Bachmeier are both guys. Pavia goes in drafts. Bachmeier doesn't
Really?
go very often. Now, here's the thing. We call them in the CFF world Konami code quarterbacks, right? Cheat codes. And you guys nailed it, right? It's rushing and receiving. That's what you want. So the Frank Harrises of the world, right? The Diegos. Yep. But Bachmeier, on the other hand, he doesn't offer as much rushing upside, particularly because he has a concussion every third game because he holds onto the ball for 10 seconds. But Sonny Cumbie, in your defense, the air raid, they have Cyrus Allen, right? Smoke Harris. I mean, they got some guys there. Dakotas Crawford on the all-name team. So they have guys that are great. JT Daniels is another one that, yes, on paper at Rice with Luke McCaffrey, he's going to be awesome. But he doesn't give you any rushing upside, so that ultimately hinders that. Frank Harris is a first-round pick in CFF, so you nailed that, Robert, but it's just not a great value pick because
it's true.
he's the stud of all studs. People love Frank Harris, and especially with his story. So, and then Emory Jones. He's another one that he's
Rushing, yeah.
he great value, 20th round pick. You got Satterfield. Satterfield had Malik Cunningham, who was just a stud in CFF, right? Rushed for 1,000 yards and 20 touchdowns a couple years ago. Satterfield, we in the CFF world love to go after Satterfield quarterbacks.
All right.
Emory,
good.
Emory's a little bit to where he's a little undervalued right now, I would say, because of Arizona State and kind of perception. But great pick. He's a guy that I like to get in the 20 to 25 rounds. So you guys did a great job. You guys should come play some CFF for sure.
Well, I was just telling Robert we have so much free time. We definitely should, right?
I think it's currently illegal in Ontario for me to play fantasy, which is weird, but
what?
That's so interesting because the one site that offers CFF is from Canada. That's the only way that we can play is because Canadians offer it, man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Other than you, it's the best thing that Canada offers, in my opinion.
Wow, thank you. No, I mean, DraftKings is because they're basically Ontario legalized sports gambling, and I used to play Prize Picks, and it was so sad because I built because I do a lot of esports, and one of the esports I follow is Call of Duty, and on Prize Picks they had Kill Things, and I literally built right before gambling was legalized, sports gambling was legalized in Ontario. Of course, you could do it on gray area other sites, but I was like,
Sure.
okay, I had this Call of Duty model, and I'm like, I'm just gonna. They have these things on Prize Picks. I'm just gonna build a kills model, and it was working amazingly well. And then I'm like, it's illegalized. And then Prize Picks is we have to shut it all down. I'm like, no, I was doing so well. So then, but then now Bet365 is offering them, so I can bet kill lines. So I'm okay with that. No parlays though, but that's okay. But no, it's that was so sad when that happened though. I think it's not deliberate. It was kind of a glitch in the law. It was some weird glitch of how they worded it, but maybe it'll get fixed one day. But yeah.
Well, crazy. Well, this is a great introduction into CFF. Come play with us sometime, and we'll get you hooked for sure.
Yeah, we'll when you have one again, we'll do another little contest like this. This is fun.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, overview of the American really quick. We've talked about it a little bit. I've got six new teams coming in: UTSA, UAB, Florida Atlantic, Rice, Charlotte, and North Texas. This is interesting to me. The teams that group leaves behind in Conference USA, their average power rating I had is a negative 5.1. The teams that they pick up in the American average a minus 1.2. That delta, it doesn't sound a lot, but if you think, if I can play Central Michigan every week and all of a sudden I'm going to play in Cal or Wake Forest, that's a different proposition. And that's basically the kind of move up that they're looking at. So interesting, something to keep in mind. That's not a small move, even though this conference kind of looks like 7 head coaching changes. That's half the jobs. Changed head coaches over the offseason, or, since November, let's say. Another thing that stuck out to me in the metrics is this conference, like a lot of G5 conferences, they got absolutely gutted in the portal. The average team lost over 900 Ryan yards from last year, and I don't have a breakdown between the portal and graduation, but they only picked up on average 89 through the portal. So there's a big rebuild. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays out going forward. I'm just wondering if, they changed the rules. So I think they got rid of the 25 per year signing limit. And I think that's really going to affect a lot of the G5 conferences where they're just going to need a deeper bench just so they can develop guys over 2 or 3 years as the best ones kind of move up. Before we start, a quick primer on the metrics that I'm going to refer to. Apex adjusted passing efficiency over expectations. That's my passing metric. 100 is average for all FBS quarterbacks. Ryan, receiving yards above noob. That's basically how well a person or a team does versus we'll just call it a noob receiver, just giving him a replacement level yards per reception. Similarly, GGAB, ground game against Boston College. That's basically how many yards did this team get above if it had been instead Boston College running. I don't know if you asked Josh, Boston College, their average was 1.96 yards per attempt for a whole team.
That's amazing.
That's just fantastic. That's just superbly bad.
That's John McNulty effect right there.
You need 5 rushes to get a first down.
Yeah, well, you'd still be short too.
Actually, you'd still be short. Yeah,
it would be 6th and inches. That'd be a good name for a fantasy team. That's my name. My fantasy team name.
There you go.
So, we're gonna go through our teams. Where each of us is gonna do our most fascinating team. Then we're gonna go through the rest. I will start. My most fascinating team is Temple. Of course, because what do we do on this podcast? We don't go on the path. We stay far away and we go into the shrubs where there's a lot of cool stuff to find that not everybody knows about. I am so intrigued by Temple this season. Second year under Stan Drayton, who's been in bigger programs, most recently to Temple. I think he was the wide receiver coach, or is it maybe the running backs coach at Texas?
Running backs, yep.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so the numbers at first glance are pretty crummy. Their offense last year was a negative 6.1 power rating, but you got to dig in deeper behind that. Their quarterback is E.J. Warner, Kurt Warner's son. You might recall, for those who listened last year, I actually had him on the bum list at some point because he started off so horribly. His first 6 games versus FBS opponents, Apex was 42. Which is kind of like the red flag for this guy needs to drop down into FCS level. His last 4 games of the season, his Apex was a 114, which is really good. If you toss out the Cincinnati game, Cincinnati had a good defense last year, as we all know. It goes up to 140 over his last 4 games. So there's definitely a proof of concept there. Here's what's interesting. And there's a little bit of a hypothesis here. They were 128th in GGAB, so they were basically barely ahead of Boston College in the McNulty magic. They ran for 100 plus only in 3 games. Once against Lafayette, and then UMass year 1 of Don Brown, and South Florida year final of Jeff Scott and their defense, which was a mess. Drayton inherited a really bad situation of offensive line. And what I think happened here is I think they kind of embraced their situation and adapted. Their first 7 games, they rushed for 30 times a game. Their last 5, they rushed for 22. So I think they kind of figured out, look, we're not going to just run into a brick wall these extra 8 times. We have a quarterback. He finally knows what to do. I think they probably understood they were putting him in horrible situations. As they rushed less, his numbers went way up. If you take out the USF game, they actually rushed just 20 yards per game because that USF defense was literally the worst against the run. with the less rushing, I think they just put Warner in better situations on third downs if he could just kind of do his own work on first and second rather than the classic Scott Loeffler run, and 3rd and 8, and what are we going to do? So I like that they improved and adapted. I think that's a sign of a really good coach that knows what he's doing. You know, to my point about the proof of concept, I look at it for head coaches. You know, Drayton, offensive guy, he improved the offense from a negative 9.4 to a negative 6.1 in year one, which is a significant improvement. If you exclude the best defenses that they faced, UCF, Cincinnati, and Duke, that actually goes up to a negative 3.5, which means they improved, almost 6 points, which is huge. The offensive line is still going to be a problem, but I believe in this staff that they know how to work around that. Defensively, basically, there was no change from the prior year. They went from a negative 3.6 to a negative 3.9. They were poor against the passing run, but not outright awful. They had a really young and inexperienced defense in 2022. Now those metrics have flipped, where they're projecting for very high improvement and returning experience in 23. So we should see a big improvement on that side of the ball. What's interesting though is if we just take out the toughest ones, and a lot of this is just a kind of a change in the conference complexion here. Their total defensive rating for the year was negative 3.9. If we exclude UCF and Cincinnati, who have moved on, that improves to a 0.9, which is actually above average for this conference. And if you take out Duke too, and that Riley Leonard magic, they're actually a plus 0.9, which, hey, guess what? They're better than USC. So I really like what I see on both sides of the ball. Then we have the intangibles. I have them with 2.3 games of bad luck last season, which doesn't surprise me with how horrible their quarterback play was early. K Ford is similarly projecting 1.9 games of improvement. When you have that and Buck metrics matching, it's like the magic formula for a huge step up. Circa has them at 5, and the over is actually even. So the money's on the under. I think the market's just completely missing this. I like that I listened to a couple of smart, informed, but yet very square podcasts, and they just ran over Temple like it was a speed bump, didn't give them a second thought, which I freaking love. Because it's not like I heard a compelling argument against. It's just, it's Temple. Next, they missed Tulane within conference, which is great. They're actually favored over Akron. Did I get that right? Yeah, I think they're favored by 9 over Akron as well, and They were only favored in one game last season. So you can just see there's parts of the market are kind of speaking here and saying the improvement's going to be there. So I'm definitely taking the over on that 5. I've jinxed it by checking Amazon for Temple football t-shirts that I'm going to buy as soon as they win game number 6 in late October. So I've laid out a whole big case there. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I mean they're a stare up team for me. I think we laid out a lot of good points. I think one of the things that intrigues me about them is you talked about that 4-game stretch at the end of the season, and you had Jordan Smith, a tight end that was basically their tight end 2 last year, that really had some big games during that stretch, and David Martin Robinson, their other tight end, also had some big games. So if you're running out some 12 personnel potentially. With EJ Warner, you have Ahmad Anderson coming back. You got Dante Wright transferring over, looking for a new spot from Colorado State. You got some pieces in that passing game that could be really good. And then you're bringing EJ Wilson from FIU, who, he wasn't dynamic or great, but combined with Edward Sadie, you got guys that can both run the ball and catch the ball in the backfield. You have pieces that are very versatile. And I think that offense, like you're saying, I think that last 4 games could be closer to who they actually are now than those first 8. And so, yeah, I think there's some intrigue. Like my buddies, I just went on a podcast and did an American preview a week ago, and my buddies were saying the same thing. Like they think Temple could really step up as well. I think there's some pieces, particularly offensively, right? Because that's a lot of what I focus on. But like you said, defensively too, they returned 9 starters. There's definitely some breadcrumbs of improvement there, or potential there for improvement. And so I think this team could be really good. And I like Stan Drayton. I think he's going to produce. He's a good recruiter. He's the guy that initially recruited Bijan Robinson over there at Texas, and Roshan Johnson. He developed him. So he's a guy that knows how to develop talent and not only get it. So I like it, man. I like you. I like your thoughts and your ideas, and I think Temple's definitely on the way up.
Cool. Robert?
Yeah, I completely agree. I have Temple as improving team. I put Stairs up. I think at a certain point they are going to improve. I think bowl contention is definitely possible. Much past that, it's a little iffy, but they're definitely going to be a lot more of an improved team. I'd say, like, for it to be elevator up, I think they'd be like, oh, maybe vaguely competing with the conference. But no, I mean, the thing is, one of the biggest issues for this team the last couple of years has been quarterback. And I know there was, like, I think last year they had, I believe it was Dwayne Mathis. He got injured. They had a bunch of guys kind of got injured and were, like, not particularly good. But now they finally, then basically later in the season, they started E.J. Warner, and he did really well. The results weren't necessarily there because they were playing against better teams, but there was a marked improvement there. You actually saw Temple being competitive in games, which they hadn't been. I mean, this is a team that USF put 70 points up against them last year, and now they were finally showing some fight there towards the end of the season, and that's good. Again, you're seeing some improvement. If they improve a little bit more, EJ Warner gets a little bit better. This could be a team you don't particularly want to play in the American this year. And although it's maybe too quick to say that they're a conference competitor, I think they're definitely in the market. They're definitely going to be in the running for a bowl, I'd say.
All right, we all agree on that. Next team, Josh, Florida Atlantic.
I got Florida Atlantic. They're my most fascinating team, and part of it is that they got Tom Herman coming in, and I think Tom Herman, while he did struggle at Texas at times, there's a couple of things that he's done well. He did well at Houston. He built that team into a juggernaut pretty quickly, if you remember that back in the day. And they're a team that's returning a lot of experience. So on defense, I think they're returning 10 starters and like 99% of their production. Not that they were a great defense last year, but I think anytime that you do have returning experience, that can be good. And then on offense, they're returning a ton of production as well. They have 8 starters, 68% production. And then they have Casey Thompson coming in. And essentially what Tom Herman needs to have a good offense is he needs a stud QB. And then he also needs a good slot receiver. And he's got that in LeJohntay Wester, who put up really good stats last year. And Larry McCammon, who's a 1,000-yard back last year, he's coming back. They got Kobe Lewis, who struggled last year at Purdue, but at Central Michigan the year before that, he, I think, put up 1,000 yards. And so he's a productive back. I just think there's pieces here that Tom Herman can really work with. Casey Thompson and Tom Herman worked together at Texas. That's originally where Casey Thompson was. He got recruited by Tom Herman. So he's his type of player. And like Tom Herman loves to have like running quarterbacks. And although that's not what Casey Thompson's like known for, he was recruited to do that out of high school. He was recruited with Cam Rising in the same class. They're very similar. And while he wasn't going to do that at Nebraska, he can certainly do that in the AAC against this competition. I think this is a better competition level for Casey Thompson. He's a better passer than people give him credit for as well. And I think him and Tom Herman are going to unlock things because Tom Herman, man, like that guy, he will lose games he probably shouldn't lose at times, but they will beat teams that they shouldn't beat as well. He's a guy that he's like Hugh Freeze. He game plans against the big teams and then tries to get by against the others. But I think there's some stuff here where I don't know how long Tom Herman's going to be there, to be honest. But I think there's some pieces here for them to do well in year one. Now, I'm not saying win the conference, but I think they can be a top half of the conference team. We'll say that. And so I'm intrigued. And a lot of it is because I just love the offensive firepower that they're putting together there, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. Robert?
Yeah, no, I have this as elevator up. First of all, it's not even just Tom Herman; it's also Casey Thompson too. I mean, what an insane pickup, right? I mean, obviously, last season at Nebraska, you cannot pin that on Casey Thompson. That is not his fault. But no, Tom Herman. I mean, this is the thing. There is a lot of debate about his legacy there at Texas, and I mean, he's no longer the coach of Texas, which tells you how that debate went. But the thing is, a lot of it wasn't his fault, right? It was just because he would go 8-6, 8-6, 7-5, 9 and whatever, 9-5, right? He'd be consistent, but he would not be at the top tier. It wouldn't be like maybe they get into the conference championship in once in a blue moon every couple of years or so. But Texas was like, we deserve to be one of the top teams in the country. We deserve to be one of the top schools in the country, one of the best teams out there. And he was not able to provide that for them, and that's why they decided to move on and took a ginormous gamble on Steve Sarkisian, one I don't think has paid off, and I don't particularly think is going to pay off this year. But again, that's what it took. And the thing is, it wasn't like we're not talking like Tom Herman didn't go like 3-9 at Texas or anything like that. Like he was able to put up consistently winning seasons, was able to do pretty well in bowls. But you take that consistency, okay, you take away some of the blue chip level prospects of Texas, okay, that's fine. You're going to lose that a bit. But you now have a step down in competition where the head coaches are going to be like, you're not going to have to play Oklahoma every year. The head coach, the quality of coaching, the quality of players you're playing against is also bad. But you're also got Casey Thompson, which, and I'm not 100% sure on this, but Tom Herman may or may not have recruited at Texas in the first place. He may have. I don't know for a fact, but I think that kind of that timeline matches up with that. So no, I absolutely love this team. This is a team when again, like, when you're talking about Florida Atlantic, I mean, this is a team that made a deep run into the college basketball playoffs in March Madness. And then you're like, okay, well, maybe they're a basketball school now, but they're definitely not a football school. Well, no, they got they got Nebraska's quarterback from last year, and they have the old coach from Texas who was just not amazing. That's why he's no longer the coach of Texas. Like this school is making a play for themselves to be an actual conference powerhouse, like a sports powerhouse here, not just in basketball, but potentially in football too. And I'd love to see this team. Again, I don't know what the expectations level are for this team, but like this is going to be, and I think conference, I think the AAC is going to play some weeknight games, right? So we're going to get to see some of these games. But I'm excited to see that. I can't wait to see some. I can't believe I'm saying this, but
I agree. Yeah, I have an elevator up too. I think that I'm probably a little more generous in my characterization of Casey Thompson at Nebraska. I actually have him with the 122 Apex last season in the best defensive division in all of football. And that puts him above Clayton Tune and Jaden DeLora, who are pretty freaking productive.
Yeah.
A thought and a question. I want to see Herman be more aggressive with Thompson than he was with Ellinger, saying, hey, throw the 3 yards down the field and see what happens. The production for Ellinger was pretty poor at Texas. He was a gamer, but just he didn't throw downfield nearly as much as I think that he should with Thompson. I'm hoping that he does. I can't think of anybody that comes close to being as established of a Power 5 quarterback dropping to a Group of 5 team as Casey Thompson. You know, you've seen Jake Hayner, who had like 2 or 3 starts at Washington and was good-ish, and he was just magical at Fresno State. Nick Starkel was pretty freaking bad at 2 different SEC schools, and then he set the Mountain West on fire. Who even comes close to this drop? Do you guys have any kind of guess, like who would compare to this quarterback dropping in class?
Maybe JT Daniels here. And,
we'll get to JT Daniels soon. That's basically it. But the thing is, like, before this was kind of unheard of, right? Transfers were at most lateral. Right, like when you're talking about Jalen Hurts, you believe he was a grad transfer out of Alabama to Oklahoma. Okay, the smallest of steps down, but that's functionally a lateral transfer. most of the transfers were grad transfers unless something horrible happened to the school, at which point you had to sit out for a full year, and then you transferred to stay out for a full year. At that point, then the only time you transfer is if you were for these football players was if you were afraid your draft stock was falling. That's no longer an issue. Now you can transfer for free, play the next year easily, and also they can just bribe you to do it, so it's fine. They'll just pay you money. So now, like before, when it's like, because like if I was Casey Thompson 5 years ago, I'd be like, how does this move to FAU help me get drafted to the NFL? Now it's like, well, they're gonna pay me $500,000, so sure, yeah, why not, right? And like the way the NIL is now working, it just completely changes the calculus on all these moves, and you're going to start seeing. And this isn't even the only one, right? I mean, we talked about Bachmeier there at LA Tech, JT Daniels at Rice. We're coming up that one. We keep talking about that one. We're probably have to do Rice soon here, and then Casey Thompson as well. Like you're now starting to see a lot of these guys who are like established Power 5 quarterbacks. They're now like, you know what, yeah, just give me some money. It's fine. I'll just go there. And you know what? Maybe I go to the NFL, but I think some of them are accepting, you know what, maybe I'm not going to go to the NFL, and I'll just make a couple $100,000 now while I'm in college, and then, I don't know, figure it out. Maybe go to the USFL, which is maybe, or USFL or XFL, and maybe that's what they're looking at.
Yeah. Agree. You know, their first little wave of prime earning years before they turn 45 or whatever. Some other thoughts on FAU. Their non-conference last year is pretty brutal. They had Ohio, who won the MAC East. They had UCF, who now is a Power 5 team. They had Purdue, who won the Big Ten West. They have this year Ohio, defending MAC East champs, who lose almost nothing. They're at Clemson, defending ACC champs, and they're at Illinois, who I had as the number 1 defense and number 7 overall in FBS last season. I bring that up because you've got 3 really tough, 1 sneaky tough non-conference games. And I'm looking like for, again, a little flash of signal from the market. Circa has their total at 7.5. You've got 2 almost certain losses, and the other one's a coin flip. Vegas likes this team's prospects within the conference a lot more than is kind of being first flashed. If you look at the likelihood of wins in those 3 games, I've got that. I've also got they had.
While you're talking about that, let me call up a conference championship odds while you're talking about that.
Okay, yeah, please. I've also got they had 1.6 games of bad luck, which is statistically significant on my end. K Ford is projecting 1.6 games of improvement. When those 2 match, it's just an elixir for a huge step up. There's so many reasons why these guys should take a big step up. I actually don't want to play that over, but I think if they're more than like plus 500, I'll probably put a little something on them to win the American. It's not a bad bet at all.
All right, what do you guys think FAU is to win the American? I'm
guessing. I guess they're probably like 800 or 900.
850.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Good job, Mark.
The difference there. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of value in that. Again, you know, there's a lot of game theory here, and this is, hoping that Casey Thompson doesn't turn an ankle severely. But be interesting. 2 interesting prospects right off the bat here. Which then, did you want to say something else, Josh?
Well, I was just saying it'd be interesting to get like an in-season total wins bet, where it's probably going to drop, right? Like it's probably going to start off 7.5, and it's going to probably drop like 6 after they go 1 and 2 to start the season, or 0 and 3.
Yeah,
and
that's a good
you
point.
might be able to get that and hit it. It's it's better maybe an in-season bet than an actual preseason, because this is a razor thin margin for them. They're gonna have, if they have an 8-4 year, that's going to be an excellent year. They're probably playing in the conference championship at that point.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So it's intriguing.
Yeah. Again, I'm almost using that logic just to say, well, gosh, plus 500 is a fair price on that if they're projected to be, just money line against anybody. Who might be? Who Robert's going to take? The defending champ, adorned on my T-shirt, Tulane.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm gonna rain on your parade a little bit here. I've got Tulane as elevator down. This is classic. Elevator down. This is classic regression candidate, and it's written everywhere on this, right? This is a team that if you go back the last couple of years, they're 500, maybe a couple games below 500, but never more than 7-5 in the regular season through the year. They keep their same QB, but they need to replace Tajay Spears. Which, and again, if you watch the Cotton Bowl, that was insane. I didn't think people could. How many rushing yards did he have? Like 300. Like, it was some insane number of rushing yards against USC. It was absolutely insane. Um, you have to replace that, and I don't think you can replace a running back like that at that school that easily. And as you mentioned, the American is losing running backs in the graduation of the transfer portal. Tajay Spears is one of those. And I think it's really hard to do. And they also lose several of their receivers from last year too. And the thing is, Tulane is cool, and as we've mentioned before, they have a really cool logo, and that's true. But at the same point in time, there's a lot of times through the year last year I liked Tulane in some games, but then when they played, I think who was it that they played? There was times when they played other teams in the conference, and I liked them. I liked the other team, and then I think I got a couple of relatively they're not really bad beats, but it's like whatever beats, but it's just okay. Maybe that couldn't have happened, or maybe that went a little unfavorably towards me. And it's fine, but it's they kind of relied on a little bit of luck to get that record last year. And I think you do that, luck regression back, you lose the running back. I think this team could be this could be a lot worse this year. So I think this is an elevator down team for me.
All right. Fair. I totally get the point. I have them stairs down. Kind of to start where you left off. I did them have with 1.8 games of good luck. I mean, they were legitimately good last season. They were, by my metrics, the best G5 team. K Ford has them with 1.1 less wins, so that just kind of confirms the good luck on my metrics. And Vegas has them winning 9, which is a step back too. Just last season they had a magical season, aside from that weird loss to Southern Miss. Also the case for regression. They lost 1,300 yards of Ryan from last season, so they just got scorched. They added 0 through the portal. Why I can't put them elevator down, I think at this point, Willie Fritz, I've been a believer since he basically got to Tulane. I liked him at Georgia Southern. He's basically the reason I got this T-shirt a few years ago. They were legitimately good versus, the run. In the past, they were 9th in the G5 against both the run and the pass, and they actually project to actually improve based on their how much they had some inexperienced guys, believe it or not, in that defense last year. They improved so much. So there's going to be regression, I think, between the coaching and the defense. I kind of couch it more as a stairs down. So Josh, settle the tie and tell us they're elevator up then, I guess, right?
Oh yeah, man. They're win national championship next year.
There you go. Yep.
No, I mean, I guess if we're going off of 12-2 and last year, then I guess you have to say they're going to go down at least a little bit. But I definitely don't think they're elevator down. I mean, Willie Fritz, it's hard to bet against Willie Fritz. I think he's one of the best coaches, maybe in all of college football. I mean, he's just incredible. And although they had a offensive coordinator last year, Jim Svoboda, he wasn't actually calling plays after week 1 or 2. And so I think it was Slade Nagel maybe. I don't know. That was a weird situation. I still don't really know what happened, but Slade Nagel was calling plays. And so he's coming back. Yeah, they lose Tajay Spears, but last year was an outlier. He got 41% of the carries. They're usually splitting carries 25% to RB1, 22% to RB2. So the idea that, and they have Shotty Clayton coming in, who is a former 4-star, who's from New Orleans, played at Colorado. They have some stud freshmen too coming in. I don't know. Yes, Tajay Spears will not be there, but I'm not sure how much they're gonna really feel that effect of Tajay Spears, because I think there's gonna be enough talent there. And I also think, they got Michael Pratt coming back. I know the Ryan doesn't like it, but Michael Pratt is the one that is the engine that ultimately I think drives that entire offense. And so it's are they? I don't know. They return 8 starters on defense. I think that this is going to be, yes, they've been 7-6, 6-6 the last several years. and they just went way up. So they're going to come down a little bit, but I still think they're a top 3 team in the conference. And so I just can't go elevator down. I feel like that's a stairs down for me.
All right.
Fair.
Not quite in Temple's league would be the South Florida Bulls, who adorn your T-shirt and had a singular win last season. Congratulations on that. Is that T-shirt commemorating the team or the one win last season? Is it okay?
Man,
no, it's
so
just the team.
I had USF season tickets back in the Quentin Flowers era with
There
Roy
you go.
Taggart when he was actually a good coach and stopped ruining programs. I'd actually make the argument that Quentin Flowers actually made that dude's career from just the 1 year that he was magical. But yeah, I'm a huge USF fan. Like I love their team. I've had season tickets there when I lived there. So, and they're absolutely terrible. Like Jeff Scott didn't know what he was doing. Yeah. And, I do think it's one of those things with Jeff Scott. I was thinking about this earlier today. I think if you are going to be a productive, like G5 head coach, you just need to be good at something, like a genius at something, offense, defense, and you can make it work. Tom Herman, right? Like that guy made it work at Houston because he's an offensive genius. The two, like Willie Fritz is a little bit, I think, of a anomaly in that he's pretty good offensively, but he's just good at everything.
He's just a football coach.
Now, and I think USF bringing in Alex Golish was a brilliant move because this is a guy that learned under Josh Heupel, right? He's a disciple of Josh Heupel. He called plays last year, like when they took off and they were great in the SEC for Tennessee. From everything that I've heard about him, it's this guy can call plays and he can recruit. And if you can call plays and you can recruit at USF, like you can have a good squad. Mm-hmm. And so I really think that not in 2023, but in 2024, that this is going to be a team that could be really, really good. And they're bringing in some interesting pieces from the portal. Naquan Wright, running back, former 4-star from Florida. They got Coffrey Brown, who was not from the portal this year, but was a former UNC wide receiver. Yusuf Terry, former Baylor wide receiver. They got Jaden Alexis coming in from Texas. So they have a lot of former P5 wide receivers that are there that I think can fit Alex Golish's system. And ultimately, it's going to come on offense. It's going to come down to, either can Jerry Bohannon, can he be the guy? Or the guy that I personally like is Byron Brown. I don't think he starts the year necessarily, but I think he's a guy that could take over if Jerry's not lighting it up. And they just go, we're just going to punt it towards the future and let Byron Brown take his licks and play for 2024. But from a CFF, from a college fantasy perspective, this is the only time I'll really mention college fantasy. But these are the type of teams we love. They can potentially explode offensively, and they are terrible defensively. Yeah. So they're just going to have a bunch of garbage points and all that. So this is a team, man, they're going to be the bottom of the barrel. But I believe that this is ultimately an elevator up team in the sense of I think they're going to show improve, kind of like Temple, right? They're going to show improvement later on in the year. And I think going to 2024, if Alex Golish can recruit it's suggested that he can, that this is a team that could ultimately make some noise in the future because sitting in Central Florida where they're at, they can recruit great players. We'll see if they can get there.
Yeah. I might actually be, really bad pun here, a little more bullish than you are on this team. They actually made a huge improvement last season. They went from I am at a negative 5.7 in 21 to a plus 2.0 on offense in 22. I didn't watch them. I can't tell you that I saw, improvement on the field because I didn't see them on the field because their defense was so horrible. And maybe that played a little bit of part of it where they were in garbage time early. When we were talking before we did the first pod, you turned me on to Byron Brown, and I'd never heard of the guy. And I looked. This is fascinating. He had 2 starts last season. I guess Bohannon was hurt last season for a part of it.
Yeah.
He had 2 starts versus Tulsa and UCF. I mean, pretty good defenses for this conference. One of them has moved on. He had an apex of 124, and he ran 27 times for 185 yards, almost 7 per carry. Are you kidding me? My gosh. I don't know. You know, college players play for like 4 or 5 seasons. You know, I think there might be a step up here quicker than you're thinking. I'm not saying that's a perfect team, but you know, I think the offense is not that far away from being, you know, among one of the better ones in the conference. You know, their defense was terrible. They're another one of these teams I had them as the unluckiest team, absolutely the unluckiest team in 2022. And K Ford projects them as having the most improvement in wins over the prior season. So there's a lot of reasons that I think the improvement's going to be there quicker rather than later. You know, the total on them is 4.5 wins, so that's saying 3.5 wins better already. I have a question for you, and when I ask you this question, I'm going to ask you a question before the question. Do you know, and when I ask if you know who this person is, you might know where the question is going. Do you know who Dick Tomey is, former San Jose State and Arizona coach?
Yep.
So I had heard that basically Willie was kind of floundering at South Florida, and the athletic director brought in Dick Tomey to kind of say, hey, fix this because it's not working. And that's when the Quentin Flowers team came alive. Is that kind of what happened or no?
Yeah, so man, I'll try to be succinct with this. Essentially, he went to go learn the veer and shoot from Baylor, Art Briles. He went out there and he came back, and I don't know if that was like Dick that suggested that, but he essentially went out and learned that and then came back, implemented some of those principles, and then he essentially, like, the team, like, they went 1-3 to start the year that Quentin Flowers really went off, and the players basically sat down with Willie Tackler and like, just let Quentin do his thing, because this guy was a high school legend in Miami. Like, everybody knew what Quentin Flowers could do. Yeah. And they said, hey, Willie, get out of Quentin's way. Just let him play his game. And the guy just went off and just like, I'm talking about a guy that ran just for, you know, couple thousand yard seasons rushing, 18 touchdowns. And he literally that guy got Willie Taggart the job at Oregon, which then parlayed that into Florida State. And, you know, I think Quentin was the ultimate engine of that. But yes, he went out and learned from Art Brow. So maybe Dick was the connection there. I'd never heard that, but that's awesome.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Sorry for a little digression there, but once you mentioned the Quentin Flowers, I had to just dig into that. Robert, what do you got on South Florida?
Yeah, I do have this actually stairs up. I think the biggest thing is that Charlie Strong is gone. I mean, Charlie Strong, again, this is the American Conference is like the Texas former Texas head coach's retread. Now you've got Tom Herman come in, and Charlie Strong's gone now though. But like, Strong was not particularly good at Texas. I think they're like, oh, we're going to hire Texas's old head coach. It's like, well, but that's not maybe the best plan, because he wasn't that good of a head coach at Texas. So just because he was Texas head coach doesn't mean he's good. And then he's like, I'm just gonna not be good. So no, he's gone. And again, it is a rebuilding year. They're gonna basically have to rebuild everything. But if they've made some improvements on defense, if you can improve that defense, have a little bit more competent of an offense, this team can improve. Maybe like fringe bowl candidate. Maybe that's like the peak is like maybe they go to a bowl. But like that's, again, it's a huge improvement. And again, I think that Charlie Strong really had no idea what he was doing in this program. And like maybe he'll go coach a D2 school or something. I don't know. But that was, I think, the biggest impediment to this. And didn't they also have like Charlie Weiss as like offensive coordinator for a bit there too, or something? Or am I misremembering?
Yeah, he was Charlie Weiss Jr.
Oh, Junior, not okay. But that's
so. But he was at FAU with Lane Kiffin, and then he actually went to Ole Miss last year.
Yeah, well, we know nepotism works out in college football, so that's fine.
Yeah.
I think that this is an improved team, and I'd like to see what they can do this year. And then again, when we're talking about them in 2024, they could be a legit contender in this conference.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal. Like, I did watch Byron Brown play, and that kid is unbelievable, and his fit in this system is unbelievable. Now, I don't know what has happened in spring ball, or like maybe he's just not a great practice player, and so he hasn't impressed Alex Golish, or maybe Alex is just keeping him under wraps. But I'm hoping that guy, as quicker he gets in, the quicker like this team's going to take off. Because I just don't think Jerry's quite the passer that Byram is. And you read off the running stats, Byram can run the ball too. Like that, he's electric, and he's a lot like Hendon Hooker, to be honest.
Yeah,
and his strengths.
When you said that, I thought, yeah, that sounds like Hooker.
Mm-hmm.
Thing to watch for this team then sounds like just sneakily wait for that QB switch, and then just put them in a totally different context in terms of how you might want to play them.
Yep.
All right. Next team, I'm going to do SMU. I have them as stairs down. We actually mentioned them as maybe a possible best G5 team last year coming into this season. They lose Tanner Mordecai, which I think I'm a bigger believer in than Josh, but we'll get over it. It's interesting. I don't really see any bad losses last season. The teams they lost to: Maryland, TCU, at UCF, Cincinnati, and at Tulane. So the 7-6 I think is a little deceiving. It's their second season under Brett Lashley. The new quarterback, Preston Stone, I hadn't really heard of him until I was basically getting ready for this. I guess he was like a top 15 recruit. So doesn't surprise me, even though SMU is not a marquee team. Just, you're in Texas where they have a lot of quarterbacks. They had a big loss in receiving. They lost Rashee Rice. I guess he's in the NFL now. I had him number 7 in my Ryan for all players last season. You would probably know how good this kid is better than I. They returned Jordan Curley, who I actually had in the top 100 of all receivers last season, so he probably figures to be their big game threat. Running game, I don't really see a big change there. Their defense was pretty whatever, a little bit on the poor side. What's interesting is, they have a low improvement metric, but they bring in there will probably be a little bit of a hope of a plug and play there. On the other side of their no bad losses, they didn't really have a great win. Their best win, to me, looks like versus Memphis at home, which, congratulations, you beat a 500 team at home. You're kind of supposed to do that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious how much of what they have here is Rhett Lashley, for whom I have respect, versus residue from Sonny Dykes, as Sonny Dykes won at Louisiana Tech. He won at SMU. In between that, he proved that Cal's a horrible job, and he went to the national title game at TCU. So I still kind of need to be convinced on Rhett Lashley as a head coach. No real data points on luck. They've got a lot of easy games, Prairie View A&M, Charlotte, ECU, Tulsa, Rice Navy, who I think they should all be favored against, but they've got 2 tough ones at Oklahoma and at TCU. So they're kind of not working with a lot of margin there if you just consider those both losses. I see them as stairs down, and to kind of go back to a theme I've hit on like probably 3 or 4 times, way too many times already. They host Louisiana Tech. That's going to be interesting. Louisiana Tech's getting 17. Total on that is only 65.5. That might be a pretty sound over bet with all the new faces they have on a crummy defense. And Louisiana Tech is just not fond of playing defense, and they want to use Mr. Bachmeier. I think this could get into the 70s. So stairs down, interesting team, and I am looking forward to that game against Louisiana Tech. What about you, Robert?
Yeah, I've got 1 second for SMU, right? Yeah. I actually do have it stairs up a little bit. I actually have the defense improving slightly from last year. Obviously, they have to replace Tanner Mordecai at quarterback, but I think they were able to do that. They haven't been able to do that. So yeah, I think it's a slight improvement, but again, like the biggest thing last year on this team was the defense. Was like, okay, great, we're gonna put up 48 points. It's like, we're gonna give up 52 though, so we're gonna lose the game. And that was the problem, right? It just seemed like it didn't matter how many points Tanner Mordecai was able to put up there; they were gonna lose the game because they just could not stop them on defense, right? So that's where I kind of actually like. I like SMU a little bit to improve this. Again, maybe like I think this conference is a little bit more competitive this year with some of the new additions. I think they could be up there though. I think they could be one of the top couple teams in the conference.
Probably not enough to take over 8 though. Does that seem reasonable, low, high to you?
That seems like the mark, right? That's where it's like, okay,
Wow.
I like 8-4 is a very doable season. I could definitely see that because I think that's what they had last year, right? It's like 8-4, like 9-5,
7-5, I think, and then they lost
7-5. Okay, so then so basically, 8-4 seems about right. I think they're an improved team, but 8-4. But that's where the line is, and that's why they set the line there. They want to make you think about these.
All right, so the guy who did not believe in Tanner Mordecai, you must think that SMU is going to win like 11 this season, then, right?
Yeah, I personally think that SMU has a chance to be the best G5 team. Kind of like what you guys were talking about last year. Yeah, like I'm all in on SMU, and some of it is I know the personnel really well, because I'm a Miami fan, and I'm also a huge SMU guy, and I have been for years. So. Rhett Lashley originally recruited Preston Stone back in the day. So he always felt like he was a great fit for his system. I think Preston Stone is such a gamer. And he came in against Cincinnati last year when Tanner Mordecai got hurt and just, kind of came in, hit 2 touchdowns really quick. And it's just one of those things where like, he has a lot of respect on that team because he's a Dallas high school legend. And people want to come in and play with him. And so
really?
I think Preston Stone, I personally think Preston Stone's better than Tanner Mordecai. I think he's better decision maker, like with the ball. I think he's personally. But then also, like, look, Jordan Curley, honestly, a lot of people thought he was way up. He was up there with Rashee Rice. What's really held Curley back is he just gets injured a lot. If he stays healthy, the number one wide receiver in a Rhett Lashley offense over 4 of the last 5 years has gotten over 1,100 yards receiving. And they average around 1,200 yards. And so this guy's a plug and play. In fact, back in the day, this is the offense I would support 2 different. I mean, you had James Prochet back in the day that was getting 1,000 yards. And they usually had 2 guys. So their main beat writer, who's a guy named Billy Embody. He believes they're going to have 2 1,000-yard receivers. Jake Bailey, who's from Rice back in the day, and the team loves. He just can't stay healthy. And then Jordan Curley as well. They just pulled in Jordan Hudson from TCU, who was a 5-star according to On3. He's got a lot of talent. Then they pulled in Keyshawn Smith and Romello Brinson from Miami. So Cavante Dixon from Texas. I mean, they're pulling in big 4-star, high 3-star recruits that are coming in here. And then offense, at running back, they have Jalen Knighton, who in 2021, like really thrived under Rhett Lashley as a lead back at Miami. He really ended that year really, really well. Then you have LJ Johnson, who's a former 4-star from Texas A&M, ran like a legit 4.4 40 and just like couldn't get on the field, dealt with the injury issues at Texas A&M, but he's coming in. He's the RB2. And then you have Kamara Wheaton, who's like the former 5-star. He's the RB3. And so in RJ Maryland, who's a former 4-star tight end, who was a freshman All-American. So you got a team that, have a lot of talent at the skill position. Now, how that translates, like we'll see. I think my thing would be if they all stay healthy, because the common theme of the guys I just mentioned to you, all of them have been hurt at different points, whether it's Curley or Bailey or Jalen Knighton, LJ Johnson, they've all struggled with injuries. Preston Stone, he had a collarbone injury last year. And so All these guys have gotten injured at different points. If they can stay healthy, I think SMU. I mean, like other than Oklahoma and TCU, yes, those are probable losses. But I mean, in conference, they avoid Tulane and they avoid UTSA. So like and they don't play. I mean, on their schedule, I'm kind of looking at it and going, who are they going to lose to? Like, in conference. I think, let me see if I have it up here. They got, in conference, they have ECU, then they play Temple, Tulsa, Rice, North Texas,
my God.
Memphis, and Navy.
Jesus.
I mean, you're talking.
It's a gift.
It's a gift. I mean, you have the potential here for a team that could really make a run in conference. And look, man, they are recruiting at a crazy level. They got boosters and a lot of money at SMU, a lot of private money. And so it'll be interesting to see what they can do this year. I'm not sure what Rhett Lashley is a head coach, but I know that he can call an offense. The questions I have are around the defense here, but they pulled in a ton of Miami defensive line. They put a couple linemen from Miami as well, which offensive line in Miami is not great, but it's P5 linemen that at SMU, they're like, yeah, we don't see guys that are this big. So we'll see ultimately what happens. But
bad fit in the ACC is a different thing than bad feet in the American. They can become okay pretty quickly. A couple of things, and I'll just throw these questions both out to you before we move on. Was Stone recruited by Lashley to Miami? And then second question, do you think there's any chance maybe – I'll frame it this way. What percent of the motivation for Mordecai transferring to Wisconsin was thinking he might lose the job to Preston Stone?
Yeah, probably 80, 90%.
Really?
So, yeah. I mean, there's a couple things. Yeah. I mean, Lashley – so he promised not to take he recruited Preston Stone to SMU, and then he basically promised not to take him with him to Miami. Now, Preston Stone's dad is a major booster at SMU. So there is some I mean, he's talented, right? But I don't know if it's all that Mordecai is not more talented than Preston Stone, but Preston Stone was going to get the job this year. That was basically the deal. Mordecai, you got a year, and then we're going to train up Preston Stone. Because he played against – so Preston Stone played against, private school competition in Dallas, which isn't great. And so he definitely needed to develop. But the idea was he was going to develop last year, and then it was going to be his team in 2023. So
interesting. All right, well, that's helpful.